This is Movie Recapped here. In this video, I will recap one of the romantic films from 1999, titled, A Real Young Girl. So without further ado, let's get started.
Alice, a 14-year-old boarding school student, leaves school on a train for her summer break. On the train, she talks about how she hates people. Just like her parents, Alice isn't familiar with people, and she lives alone. According to her, people make her feel oppressed, and she doesn't like the feeling. She is a boarding school student, and she also says she hates holidays. And not just any holiday, she especially hates summer holidays because it is usually too long and boring. She gets down at the train station, where she takes a cab home. As she gets home, her dog, which has missed her a lot, jumps on her. She stays by the cab to caress her dog before going to hug her parent, who is waiting for her by the door. She kisses her father, and they go to eat. While they all eat at the table, Alice feels like touching herself. She bends down the table, takes a spoon that fell on it, and uses it to finger herself. Without emotions, she continues as if she is doing nothing. After the meal, her father goes to his workshop. He expresses his happiness that Alice kissed him. That evening, Alice walks around the compound with her hands, her panties down. As she is about to enter for her dinner, she bends down naked and then uses her hands to wear her panties back. She eats dinner with her family, after which she kisses her father and mother and goes to her room. She enters her room and stands in front of the mirror as she removes her clothes. Alice's body is more mature than her age, and she acknowledges this herself as she lays on her bed to sleep. She vomits on her body that night, and her mother makes her up, but rather than cleaning up, she feels comfortable in the vomit. According to her, the disgust makes her livid. In this condition, Alice opens her box and takes out her diary and pen. She sits at her table to write in her diary. She remembers and writes about her vigil experience in school. At school, after lights out, she will put her hands in her private part intentionally. And whenever the supervisor walks in, the supervisor will help her take her hands away. Then she will stand up and go to her comfort place. That night as she stood up, she noticed a colleague of hers, Martine, was awake. She hoped the girl wouldn't see her and she entered the toilet. According to her, she could stay in the toilet for hours without getting tired. She sat on the toilet seat despite the cold. After several minutes sitting on the toilet seat, the seat marks her body. Also, Martine, who had noticed her extended stay in the toilet, left her bed. Martine came to the toilet, and Alice immediately saw her coming. She stood up from the toilet seat and went to close the door. Martine got to the door. She knocked on the door, asking Alice what she was doing there. Alice refused to answer. She sat back on the toilet seat, urinated on the toilet and lit her cigarette. She stayed in the toilet for hours while Martine, who cared about her, kept banging on the toilet door to ask her what she was doing. Alice wakes up the following day, receives a mail from Martine, and she goes to pick it up. She also sits outside the house. Her mother comes to her, and she sees Martine's mail, where Martine tells her about her break. Alice tells her mother Martine wants to be a pilot, and she also says Martine lives a free life compared to her, that has to follow her mother everywhere. That day, she goes to the poultry with her mother. While her mother tries to feed the hens, she picks one of the eggs and breaks it with her hand. The scene shows a romantic scene of intercourse remains. Her mother looks at her disgustingly and lies that she found the egg broken. They return home, and she lies outside the house in her beach costume. She fantasizes about being on a beach and having to watch two couples having fun. She is long gone in this dream and fantasizes about her until her mother wakes her by pouring cold water on her body. Her mother tells her she is putting on a whore costume. She enters inside the house and sees her father with a visitor, his new male staff named Jim. Jim has Alice's body type as she faces Jim with her whore costume. She leaves there, and their family take dinner together. Before dinner, she goes to her father and removes her top. She shows him her breast, but her mother is against it. She says she should show her father such. However, her father insists it's no big deal. That night, she changes her school result. She goes to her mirror to confirm how her body will be if she is indeed a whore like her mother called her. She touches her body and masturbates in tears. The following day, her mother takes her to their store, where they bring down her bicycle. She rides this bicycle and goes to her father's workshop. She looks at Jim and fantasizes about his body and how his body will be on her. She returns home that night. During their dinner, her father leaves to set his boar trap. He tells her mother his trap almost caught a boar the night before, but her mother warns her to stop spoiling her maze. Alice leaves home the next day for the workshop. She notices the neighbors in the community look at her in disgust. She goes to the workshop and keeps looking at Jim, who has also noticed her. She fingers herself. While lying under the barbed wires, she dreams that Jim takes a worm and puts it in her private part. When he sees the worm isn't entering and it's too big for her private part, he cuts the worm into small pieces and lays them on her private hairs. He stands up and laughed. She finishes her fantasies and returns home. She hugs her father, and he talks to her about making a career in teaching. She also dresses up to go to a bar. At the bar, she sees a boy who looks at her seductively. She leaves the bar to run away from the boy, but he follows her and asks her if she is scared. He tells her there is nothing to be scared of, and he uses his hands to raise her skirts while she is on her bicycle. She gets angry at him. She reminds herself that despite Jim knowing that she is fantasizing about him, Jim has never touched her. She also goes into the woods, where she sees an older man cutting the woods and touches herself again. She visits the beach on her own, goes on her lonely trips and sits on the beach naked. She stops at a park where she watches several adults kissing and doing all their romantic acts. She decides to attend a fair. She makes up to look older. As she leaves the house, her mother wonders where she is going. At the fair, she sits beside an older man who asks her if she wants to see what's inside his box. She refuses, but the man unzips his trousers and shows her his private part. He strokes his private part while she screams and calls him a bastard. Upon returning home, she imagines her father stroking his private part in her presence. One day, she goes to the store with her mother. The storekeeper tells her mother that she is no longer a little girl and that her mother should take good care of her. The woman tells her mother of all her trips on bikes. Her mother gets angry at her and reports to her father, who yells at her and tells her she is a risk to herself. Her father stops her from all her bicycle trips. Reluctantly, Alice remains home alone. She uses a vegetable oil bottle to touch herself, but she isn't satisfied. At about the same time, she sees Jim around their house to urinate. She watches as Jim urinates, and she touches herself too. As Jim finishes and attempts to leave, she runs after him. She catches up with him at a lonely place where they touch each other. They masturbate, and Jim jacks while looking at her body. Jim releases, and he uses his sperm to rub her breasts while she also touches herself. She is finally satisfied. She stands up and screams at Jim before returning home. The following day, her father drops her at the sawmill before leaving to meet his mistress. He finds his mistress by the mountain, where they both have an intercourse. Alice finds out, and she also walks into a conversation between her father and her mother about her father's infidelity. She meets with Jim again in his car. They make out, and he attempts to have intercourse with her, but she refuses him. She tells him she isn't ready and reminds him she is still a minor. On their next meeting, he gives her a contraceptive to use. He also asks about her menstruation, so they can find a perfect time to do it. She tells him she would prefer to get it done in the evening, and he accepts. That night, her mother comes to her room to bid her good night. They hear a loud noise. The following day, they realize that Jim has fallen into the board trap her father kept. She looks through the window and picks up her book and the movie ends.
I hope you enjoyed the recap. Check out our channel for more videos like these. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and comment on how you found the video. See you soon.